So we'll break away from our mega cap performance to get straight to these third quarter earnings. EPS coming in at a significant beat, $1.95. Estimates calling for $1.58. Their net sales for the quarter coming in at $180.17 billion. Estimates calling for $177.82. Those very important numbers, both a beat here. Some potential trouble for them, though. Operating income coming in under $17.42 billion. Estimates calling for $19.72. Margins also coming in a little light here, 9.7%. Estimates calling for 11.1. In their North American net sales, $106.27 billion. Estimates calling for $104.96. And here's their AWS number, net sales $33.01 billion, a slight beat over the $32.39 expected. Those are some of the top line numbers. Guidance just coming across the board here, but I do want to bring Sam and KG back into the conversation here while I break down these numbers. So fourth quarter net sales expected to come in between $206 billion and $213 billion. Estimates calling for $208. So the midpoint just below the center there. Fourth quarter operating income expected to be between $21 and $26 billion. Estimates calling for 23.7. So that right at the midpoint there for those estimates. KG and Sam, as we take a look at these numbers, the street responding very positively. Shares up about almost 9% right now as we're getting these numbers. They're seeing strong AI demand, strong core infrastructure demand with beats on the top and the bottom line, and those numbers they wanted to see in terms of growth in that AWS category. So if we have KG with us, I'd love to get some initial thoughts here on this report as it's coming through. Shares just continuing to rise now almost 10% higher. KG, if we can bring you back into the conversation with Sam as well, seeing these sales topping here for the quarter. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, this is a phenomenal quarter. Actually, if you look at that operating margin, you did see that miss the street's expectations, but that is because of a $1.8 billion charge that's related to, I believe it's an FTC complaint. I just had this coming up. Yep, and it's an FTT with the Federal Trade Commission complaint. They did take a charge. It also looks like they're taking another $1.8 billion also. So that's the reason why we actually did see that miss. So if you kind of back that out, their margins are looking really, really good. Not only the top line growth, but it looks like they're able to streamline their process internally. Obviously, they are cutting a lot of expenses, not only when you're looking at headcount, but also trying to streamline some of the back-end data center processes as well. It does appear that AWS continues to do phenomenally well. This is a good report, especially on the back of what we saw yesterday. Microsoft, let's say it's a little bit mixed. We did see some selling into the opening today, and then you had Google, which also showed very strong results here. So when you're looking at the numbers on the headline, this actually looks like a really good report. This is a reason why the market is obviously catching a bid here for Amazon. And this is a stock that's been flagging out a little bit, consolidating. So it's consolidating. You have a reason now to kind of get into this name. And I think buyers are trying to take advantage of that.
And Sam, I want to come to you now. I know you had many conversations about Amazon expectations today. We just had one on the show a few minutes ago. And this AWS number, the CEO saying that they're growing at a pace we haven't seen since 2022. They're reaccelerating to 20+% year over year growth. How important is that to this Amazon story based on what you were hearing today?
Very important. I think that $33 billion number was very key here as far as that beat. The street expecting $32.42 billion. So they were actually wondering if this could actually be more than 18%. And as you say, coming in just above 20% year on year, I mean, that would mark an improvement. And it was certainly something that we had put to that previous guest earlier in the show about, how important that number was going to be. And they said they can't be much lower than that. So the fact that we have seen that come in higher speaks volumes now about AWS. I think, that's really, really key here, particularly because you've had the Googles coming out with a 34% increase very much on their cloud business, and Microsoft Azure coming in with 40% growth there, because really, while obviously AWS does continue to dominate as far as at least having 30% market share here very much in the cloud business, we know that the Metas, the Googles, the Microsoft has also been nipping at their heels a bit and trying to eat some of that market share as well. So I think this was a very, very significant number, and I think Jassie's comments off the back of that very much solidifies that they are happy with the trajectory as far as that growth is concerned.
And KG, I know AI is such an important part of the story here when we're talking about Amazon. I'm just looking at some of the commentary from Andy Jassy saying that they see strong demand in AI and core infrastructure. They added more than 3.8 gigawatts in the past 12 months, also citing that their adoption of their Trainium 2, its AI chip, is fully subscribed and grew 150% quarter over quarter. You know, looking at some of these numbers and their Project Rainier numbers, you know, how important is this to the further success of Amazon and also the streets sustaining this positive reaction we're seeing?
Yeah, it's very important. This is what the market's been focusing on. But this cloud business not only has an impact when it comes to Amazon with AWS and their expansion when it comes to data centers. Look at all the other cloud names that are actually catching a pretty decent bid off of this. Snowflake right now catching a little bit of a bid, up $5 or so. I mean, this is going to actually translate to some of these names that we will talk about over the next couple of weeks. The MongoDBs of the world. A lot of these companies have partnerships with Amazon, and when Amazon is unable to kind of expand its own internal storage capacity, if you will, or bandwidth, they're leveraging these other companies and also able to kind of service their customers still. So they actually have a win-win here. Overall, they still are going to be a mix between consumer discretionary as well as an AI company, and I think they have the best of both worlds, especially leading into this holiday season, which we are expecting another record-setting year when it comes to consumer spending. So I know we haven't talked about that a lot. We continue to talk about AWS, but also be mindful they do have the ability to kind of push some of these margins against some of these other companies that are seeing some tariff headwinds as well. So this is a really good diversified business, kind of similar to Walmart, and they're doing a heck of a job when it comes to running their business.
And Sam, I want to come to you with some conversations I've heard you have with guests on the show about the importance of this diversification into sports. It's not, a big thing we talk about with Amazon, but they have Thursday Night Football on Prime, and they're saying that their numbers are a 16% increase over last year's average. They've also got NBA on Prime in more than 200 countries. In terms of this driver of this sports we're seeing in streaming, it's not a category we spend a lot of time talking about, but some very interesting figures.
Yeah, they certainly are. I mean, if you can just sort of leave that up because I can actually share your screen here, Marley. It certainly is a very big focus, I think, for the street right now as far as what some of these companies are doing to try to, leverage sports right now, particularly in the streaming business. I mean, we've seen obviously what Netflix has been trying to do as well. So I think, delivering on some of these audience numbers as well, particularly with respect to the NBA on Prime. I mean, 1.25 million viewers in the US during the season opening doubleheader. It's very, very interesting to, obviously pay attention to what is happening here as we are very much seeing, I suppose, a little bit more consolidation in this space. Also, people sort of moving away from what they traditionally would do as far as how they consume some of these sports. I think, this business has been, such a big driver of the market's attention as well. I would also say that, it's interesting on the ad business too. It's going to be very interesting to see as far as some of the composition there, because I did see when you had that screen up some of the partnerships that they had made, because we were talking to that guest earlier about some of the longer term sort of independent tie-ups and companies that they had partnered up with as far as how that advertising model would actually look as far as that revenue. So I think that's an important part of the story too.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of those names here: Delta, Volkswagen, Fox, ServiceNow, Qantas, Lululemon, Live Nation, BT Group. It goes on and on. Some big names here. Perplexity as well. I was just talking about with Rick in a lawsuit with Reddit. But KG, I'd love to get your final thoughts here on this report from Amazon. Shares still trading higher, still up almost 9%.
Yeah, this is exactly what the market really needed, especially after a day like today. It continues to show that artificial intelligence theme. We will get the guidance on the call, if I'm not mistaken, when it comes to CapEx spend. So let's see what that number comes in. Obviously, there has been a little bit of a fine balance between spending too much, which could negatively impact your stock, which is what happened to Meta, or spending a little bit too little could also have an impact as well. So I think this is actually a really decent report. Let's see how also the semiconductor space as a whole actually performs tomorrow. And I'm actually looking at the memory providers there, the Western Digitals of the world, things of that nature, because those are going to be a really good gauge as to forward demand moving forward here. So overall, this is exactly what we needed for the S&P 500 as a whole. Hopefully, we're able to follow through tomorrow.
KG, we appreciate you being with us to break down Amazon's earnings, and thank you so much. And I do want to get to those Western Digital and also Coinbase earnings. So welcome in Alex Coffey here to the conversation, joining us in studio to help us break these earnings down. Alex, let's jump right into Coinbase here. You know, taking a look at their total revenue, it's coming in at 1.87, estimates calling for 1.8. So, you know, mostly in line. Their EPS coming in at $1.44, estimates calling for $1.21. Not blockbuster numbers here, up about 1%, you know, as they're just coming across the wire. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so they oftentimes within their press release will give things sequential in terms of growth rates because this is such a growing space. Oftentimes it is growing dramatically year over year. But quarter over quarter, that total revenue number is a 25% increase quarter over quarter. Their net income at $433 million was impressive as well. Customer trading volume, though, $59 billion is up 37% quarter over quarter. Institutional trading volume, $236 billion is up 22%. Now, the reaction in the stock is relatively muted. It's within 1% at the moment. So perhaps waiting for the call to get more of an idea as to what's going on. A big part of the press release discusses the idea of the stablecoin adoption in USDC. They talk about the market cap of that particular asset reaching an all-time high of $74 billion. So certainly an exciting time in crypto. They mention a strategic 3 phases of crypto adoption, both within trading, financial services, and then also the app ecosystem. They talk about an expansion perhaps into more derivatives around this, so you can see some of those other channels for revenue down the line. Really a strong quarter, once again, for Coinbase, just not enough. Yeah, I guess it's moving a little bit now, about 3-4%. So starting to age a little bit more positive. Maybe people are moving on from Amazon and seeing what's going on with Coinbase now.
And Alex, I want to stay with you here for a moment here and get your thoughts on this trading volume number, $295 billion, coming in below estimates for $310 billion. You're not seeing any adverse reaction to that, but trading volume, one of the metrics that was mentioned repeatedly, is very important for Coinbase.
Yeah, and when you look at where the weakness is, it's in the institutional volume. So the institutional numbers were expected closer to 242, 243. They come in at 236. But the customer volume, or your traditional retail flow around these assets, actually did beat the expectations by about 3%. So all things considered, mixed on that metric. But when you think about piece of the pie, institutional, a bigger trading volume.
And Samuel, I've got the fourth quarter forecast pulled up here on our shared screen so you can see it. You know, as far as the breakdown here for subscription and services revenue for this upcoming quarter, 710 to 790, the estimate above the midpoint there, but sales and marketing expenses 215 to 315, estimate also kind of at the midpoint there, and technology G&A expenses at 925 to 975. You know, we are seeing a muted reaction, but to the positive, and an interesting comparison here, because we've had so many conversations and covered so many earnings at this point where if you aren't north of the midpoint, it's been punishing, and we're not seeing that here. Do you think people are just waiting for the call?
Waiting for the call, but I would say that, in recent weeks, we have seen some of the analysts actually getting a little bit more sort of bullish on this name. And I mean, you had the folks over at JP Morgan, for instance, upgrading this name, coming off the sidelines. You had price target boosts. Yes, okay, the stock was down in trade today ahead of this. But I mean, they have sort of been talking about how, it's cheap and sees about 25% more upside from where it was, a price target 404, as I mentioned. So there are a lot of sort of more bullish analysts on what Alex had just mentioned, particularly with the USDC, certainly as far as the stable coin that is pegged to the dollar. So I think, there seems to be a lot of optimism very much around the new features on the Coinbase business platform and making very much use of the USDC payouts and instant payout links as well, payment links, I should say, accessible to more companies. So it does very much seem like, there's a lot of analysts who are very encouraged by what this company is doing.
All right, and I want to pivot now here to another earnings, the one Kevin Green actually just mentioned for us, Western Digital. He said he'd be having his eye on them. Shares popped as much as 9%, now up about 7% as these coming across. Earnings coming in at $1.78 per share, which is beating the consensus estimates by close to 13%. They're seeing a 137% increase over earnings from the same period last year. Sales coming in at $2.818 billion, which is beating the consensus for $2.75. That was by a 3.4% beat and a 27% increase over the period last year. So some very impressive growth. This following Seagate's numbers that we got recently. Alex, takeaways as we're just getting these across the wire as well.
Yeah, successful quarter once again. Strong demand for their data storage in the cloud. AI is obviously a big driver behind that. The revenue guidance suggests a 20% year-over-year pop at the midpoint for their second quarter of fiscal year 2026. The growth figure, though, on the quarter they just reported, which is this first quarter, did grow at 27% year over year. So that does suggest some sequential, deceleration, but we're still talking about 20+%. When you look at some of the other considerations going forward, they have a non-GAAP or adjusted EPS midpoint for their second quarter at $1.88. That's still a pretty strong figure. They talk about how their revenue and gross margin figures that they did report for fiscal year first quarter did exceed even the high end of their guidance. So this was a good quarter from their own assessment, and that's always a really strong starting point, especially for a company that's had the run that Western Digital has as of late.
And Sam, coming to you, we're seeing in this earnings announcement as well that Western Digital announcing it's going to raise its quarterly dividend by 25%. We've already seen in this earnings season how beneficial that can be for a company. Thoughts here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would just add that, what we're seeing here is very sort of consistent with what we've seen from other names, particularly in this whole sort of memory space as well. I mean, we had also some earnings out. I mean, you mentioned Seagate, but also the folks over in South Korea too. Samsung, very strong. SK Hynix, very strong as well. The Street certainly has turned a lot more bullish on this space because of course, the huge capex investments in AI data centers that we've heard, particularly from the hyperscalers, that is very much tightening the supply here and driving up those prices. And so these companies are very much across the board seen as beneficiaries of all of that, Marley.
And Alex, any other takeaways as we're getting these numbers coming still across the wire here?
Yeah, so they talked about the strong performance of the quarter. They have strong positive quarter two guidance. They hiked the dividend. This is all reflective of the momentum that the company feels they have. I think it's important to note, too, they have fully completed that separation of SanDisk. They finished that back in February, but it's no longer reflected in the results at all. So their focus remains on scaling sustainable technology within this AI world. So you're talking hyperscalers, you're talking cloud providers. So I'm not surprised to see the name higher. It's been on an incredible run and exciting time for Western Digital investors.
Yes, a very exciting time for Western Digital. Shares of Western Digital trading up close to 8% right now, and shares of Coinbase up about 4% on the back of their earnings. Alex Coffey, thank you for being with us today. Also, some breaking news just coming across the wire here involving Netflix. Netflix announcing a 10-for-1 stock split was just approved by its board of directors. That will be affected through the amendment that they've passed to reset the market price of the company's common stock to a range that they believe will be more accessible to employees who participate in the company's stock option program. So if you were a shareholder of record as of close Monday, November 10th, after the close to November 14th, you'll receive 9 additional shares for every share held on that record date. Trading is expected to begin on a split-adjusted basis at market open on Monday, November 17th. So some big news for Netflix, a 10-for-1 stock split there. But thanks again to Alex Coffey for being with us.